Like I mentioned, you get to hear from many of Rapture's former citizens, but the main players in the events of BioShock are Tenenbaum, Suchong, and Ryan. Starting with Tenenbaum and Suchong, these two scientist stories parallel each other. Tenenbaum was a German Jew shipped to a camp during the Holocaust as a teen, but with her natural skepticism and thirst for knowledge, began helping the Nazis experiment on the other Jews. Once the war ended, she fled trial at the hands of the Allies and ended up in Rapture. Suchong, on the other hand, grew opium in China during the 30s. Once the Japanese invaded in 1937, they slaughtered everyone in his village except for him. They kept him alive for his opium, and Suchong happily went along aiding them. Like Tenenbaum, he found himself having to flee for helping the Axis and betraying China, causing him to go to Rapture. He and Andrew Ryan seem to have been pretty like-minded, believing in doing anything to get ahead. Tenenbaum and Suchong ended up collaborating in the atom business under Fontaine. They both had a hand in the creation of Little Sisters and Big Daddies. Yeah, you were probably wondering when I'd bring them up. As the atom business grew and the Rapture Civil War began, more and more people were dying on the streets and their blood was still infused with atom. To recycle the lost atom, little girls with atom slugs in their stomachs went around drinking their blood and producing more and more atom instead of letting it go to waste. Even though the slug and conditioning made the Little Sisters nearly invincible, splicers would try to take advantage of their vulnerability and steal their atom, possibly even harvesting the Little Sister, removing the slug and leaving them to die. As Tenenbaum puts it, it's not like murder, it's more like taking a dying patient off of life support due to the symbiotic relationship the two form. To prevent Little Sisters from getting attacked, Big Daddies were created. Super strong, powerful men in diving suits armed to the teeth. They violently protect against anybody who threatens their little sister, many getting drilled in the chest or shot with rivets. Now, back to Tenenbaum and Suchong. Tenenbaum began to feel guilty about what they've done to countless children, turning them into these creatures, but they still play and laugh and sing like normal little girls. She let her maternal instincts begin to kick in, starting to care for the girls, so she quit and began freeing some of them from their condition. Suchong, on the other hand, never has that moment of regret. He keeps going down the same path of hurting others in order to make profit, something he and Tenenbaum were familiar with during the war. This leads to his demise as he gets drilled by a big daddy he's working on after he hits one of the girls. I've pretty much already summed up Andrew Ryan's character and philosophy before, but there's certainly more to him. Ryan is an extreme laissez-faire, free market capitalist who believes that no government should try to interfere with the market or the lives of the people. Basically, do whatever you want, go nuts. This political and economic ideology is based off the real-life author and philosopher Ein Man, who came up with this philosophy of objectivism, which she portrayed through her novels The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. In very basic terms, it's the idea that the purpose of one's life is to pursue their own rational self-interest. This pursuit cannot be hindered by government or religion, so the only systems worth keeping in place are those that support man's individual liberties. Altruism is also unacceptable in the system, as pursuing your own self-interest cannot be compatible with self-sacrifice. Don't get me wrong, not that being kind is bad, but saying that another's needs come before yours is. In this philosophy, a human's only duty is to themselves. People should be allowed to pursue their own happiness without objection. Objectivism may sound kinda like anarchy because of its focus on individuals doing whatever to elevate themselves, but that doesn't apply if it means tearing down or harming others. Even the name Andrew Ryan is an anagram for "We are Ein Man." Ryan also created Rapture to flee from the so-called parasites, those who don't contribute anything to society but help themselves to another's work. This may take the form of a government which taxes its people, a hobo asking for money, and people who live off of government programs. Again, he doesn't believe in any kind of altruism. He doesn't agree with putting others before yourself. One really gripping audio diary is found at the end of Arcadia called The Great Chain, in which he summarizes his beliefs.
I believe in no God, no invisible man in the sky. But there is something more powerful than each of us, a combination of our efforts, a great chain of industry that unites us. But it is only when we struggle in our own interest that the chain pulls society in the right direction. The chain is too powerful and too mysterious for any government to guide. Any man who tells you different either has his hand in your pocket or a pistol to your neck.
This great chain seems very similar to Adam Smith's guiding hand. The idea that in a society, when one individual strives for their own self-benefit, others will be elevated as well, so the free market will elevate the society as a whole. And man, Andrew Ryan has so many outstanding quotes.
It was not impossible to build Rapture at the bottom of the sea. It was impossible to build it anywhere else.
You've probably noticed that I've already gone through a normal episode's worth of content, and I still haven't even mentioned the character you play as. There's just that much to talk about. This is for good reason, because the protagonist, Jack, whose name we only know from the opening, is a silent projection protagonist. He isn't necessarily a character in himself, but a blank slate for the player to project themselves onto.
But I've got a blank space, baby, and I'll write your name.
You feel like you're in Rapture yourself, not that you're watching someone else go through this. Jack is you. Similar protagonists can be found in other games such as Portal and The Legend of Zelda. You don't ask questions or talk back, you just comply with whatever orders Atlas gives you. Are you starting to pick up what I'm putting down? Well, what BioShock is putting down? The game took this silent protagonist template and turned it into an integral part of the story. Around 2/3, 3/5 into the story comes the all-time greatest plot twist ever. No cuts, no butts, no coconuts. It's the best. Jack does not have any character because he isn't even a real human. Jack is the love child of Andrew Ryan and exotic dancer Jasmine Jolene. The fetus was then purchased by none other than Frank Fontaine for experimentation under Suchong and Tenenbaum. The entire time, you've been playing as a mind-controlled assassin, genetically designed to follow the will of Fontaine, who has returned as the rebel leader Atlas. You are his sleeper agent, sent to the surface without any memories, patiently waiting for Atlas to summon you. Throughout the whole game, he's been controlling your actions through the trigger phrase, "Would you kindly?" You can go back and replay the game, and you'll notice Atlas constantly yet subtly slip in this phrase.
Did that airplane crash? Or was it hijacked? Forced down. Forced down by something less than a man, something bred to sleepwalk through life until they are activated by a simple phrase spoken by their kindly master. Would you kindly? Powerful phrase. Familiar phrase.
Would you kindly? Would you kindly get this? Would you kindly find that? Would you kindly find that? Would you kindly find? Would you kindly get this?
Because BioShock is a video game, you, the player, have been programmed to blindly follow any orders given to you throughout the game in order to progress. BioShock takes advantage of this and uses your blind compliance as an integral part of the story. You and Jack were blindly listening to Atlas's orders this whole time without even realizing it. Well, Fontaine, Atlas, whatever, came up with this whole "save my wife and child" bit to avoid Jack and the player from getting suspicious. Then he makes it seem like he wants Andrew Ryan dead as revenge for killing his family, but Fontaine really just wants control over what's left of Rapture so he can sell his secrets to the surface without Ryan's interference and then become the richest man ever. After sharing his true identity with you, the man you've been trusting with your life this entire time just flat out betrays you. I gave the same compliment to Batman Arkham Asylum, how it uses the video game medium to the fullest potential as an interactive form of storytelling. BioShock does this, but ramps it up to level 9,000. BioShock takes full advantage of the fact that this is a game and knows how players play games and uses that in order to deliver this jaw-dropping twist. During his visit to Rapture, Fontaine's assassin comes across many strange figures who halt his progress. The first crazy you meet is the man who basically runs the medical pavilion, Dr. John Steinman. Jack needs a key from him in order to access the bathysphere to Neptune's bounty to save Atlas's family, or so he thinks. Pretty quickly, you realize that this guy is an absolute nutcase like all the villains in BioShock. Dr. Steinman came to Rapture to practice plastic surgery, but once Adam was discovered, he felt as though traditional methods were growing outdated. With this new genetic material, anything was possible. The human flesh became his clay to mold. The only limit was his imagination, which is pretty wild considering he hallucinates the goddess of beauty, Aphrodite. With his patience, Steinman tries to sculpt perfectly beautiful people, but always seems to fall short. Gosh, those impossible beauty standards for women, am I right? Out of madness and frustration that he can never achieve the perfection he dreams, he butchers his patience. The next guy you meet is Peach Wilkins in Neptune's Bounty. Before the war, he worked at Fontaine Fisheries, and subsequently, Fontaine's smuggling ring. But Fontaine began to turn on his men, taking a large portion of their cut, threatening anyone who speaks out against him, and killing those who try to squeal. He was Rapture's boogeyman. Because of these events, Wilkins is extremely paranoid, locking himself up in the fisheries and making Jack prove himself to get through. Even though he's insane, Wilkins gives us our first glimpse of the danger and cunning of Frank Fontaine, whose influence haunts Neptune. He's overly cautious, believing Frank Fontaine's still alive and well. Atlas tries to play it off like old Peachy is just a crazed splicer, but the geezer's actually right. Huh. Mobster, conman, and millionaire Frank Fontaine is the main antagonist of BioShock. Before his alleged death, he was the most influential and powerful man in Rapture, with the exception of Ryan, depending on who you asked. The man looked at Rapture as one big mark for his next scheme. Never did he get ahead fairly, but took advantage of the city for his own gain. Again, his first business was smuggling religious items like crucifixes and Bibles from the surface under the cover of Fontaine Fisheries. Later, he uses children to mass-produce Adam to make even more buttloads of money. That's all the man wants in the end, money. His master plan is all for him to become the wealthiest man to ever live. Fontaine wants to hold the monopoly on plasmids, sell them across the world, and amass tons of cash doing so. The only person who stands in his way is Andrew Ryan, who restricts contact with the outside world and would easily catch Fontaine pulling a stunt as great as that. Ryan's also in control of Fontaine Futuristics, so that's a problem. So constantly, we see Fontaine trying to bump him off, even going as far as to begin a civil war to get the upper hand. It's all a game to him, and he's clearly ready to do whatever it takes to achieve his goals. Something great about Frank Fontaine is how he's never painted as the typical money-grubbing business villain trope we all know and hate. He's so fleshed out and given tons of personality.
I remember when me and the crowd put you in that sub. You were no more than 2. You were my ace in the hole, but you were also the closest thing I ever had to a son.
We see him love, we see his heartbreak, he gets upset, and he throws tons of shade at Jack. It's like a diss track. That's probably one of my favorite things about BioShock, just the insults Fontaine tells Jack during the 3rd act. In one radio message, he compares him to Chinese takeout.
You think you're some kind of hero? I ordered you up from Suchong like a Chinese dinner. A little from column A, a little from column B.
This guy is hilarious and certainly a worthy villain for the game. Not only do I have to credit the main antagonist, but the average splicers you encounter all over the city. There are a couple of different character models for them, each with their own personalities. In many games, the common enemies are just mindless lackeys waiting for the player to shoot them. Their only dialogue would be, "Shoot him!" or "Ah, there she is." You don't believe these are actual people with actual lives. No, not BioShock. BioShock pays so much attention to the details, fleshing out each type of splicer with their own sayings, mumblings, and character traits. You'll hear the baby Jane splicer crying to herself how she came to Rapture to become a star, the waiter crying out to God for forgiveness, and the toasty coaching himself on how to talk to girls. Making the splicers more human not only makes the game even creepier, but knocks us back and causes us to realize that these were once normal people too. Man, BioShock went all out even on the little things. By now, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering when I'm finally gonna talk about him, and here it is. About halfway through BioShock, in the aforementioned Fort Frolic, you meet the legendary Sander Cohen, an artist to some, a Section 8 says others.
Time was, you could get something decent on the radio. The artist has a duty to seduce the ear and delight the spirit. So say goodbye to those two blowhards, and hello to an evening with Sander Cohen.
Your wonderful evening with Cohen begins as you pass through the fort to get to Ryan, but Cohen shuts down the bathysphere, and thus begins the greatest collab episode ever. The assassin meets the crazed artist. Man, this is an awesome anime. Before continuing to Hephaestus, he wants you to help him complete his great masterpiece, which of course consists of several dead, plastered bodies with rabbit masks.
How about this one? I call it bold and brash. More like belongs in the trash! Ah!
Your goal for the level is to run around, hunt down Cohen's former disciples, take their pictures, and frame them on his masterpiece. Sander Cohen is different than the rest of the villains you encounter throughout the game. Your goal is not to hunt him down or get him out of your way. No, it's simply to work with him. After months of living in a fallen civilization, he had no one around to appreciate his art besides a few crazed splicers, but they're not much of an audience. In a way, he seeks validation from someone, and that someone just so happens to be you. Andrew Ryan suspects this is why Cohen allowed you to live. This helps to create an interesting relationship between Jack and Cohen. Jack's excellent obedience skills make Cohen proud. You're his little moth, as he puts it. You don't criticize or doubt what he's doing, you just simply help him achieve his vision. Cohen also loves to watch you perform, and I don't just mean in terms of killing the disciples. Nah, Cohen actually turns your adventure into his private show. In Poseidon Plaza, he constantly keeps the spotlight on you, and he even makes you battle his bunny-masked splicers to the tune of Tchaikovsky's Waltz of the Flowers. You are literally putting on a dance routine for this guy. There's a heightened sense of tension in the fort, as you have no idea how Cohen will respond or behave in any given situation. This man is completely off the rails. There's zero reasoning with him outside of hoping he lets you live. After completing Cohen's masterpiece, he rewards you and allows you to be on your way to Ryan. So you don't even have to fight him. You just collab and then part ways, kind of like YouTubers. However, the player can choose to kill him if they so desire. This very naturally presents a subtle moral choice to the player. You have to decide whether to kill Cohen for his horrendous actions, or spare him and leave him be with his latest creation. Cohen doesn't betray you, he keeps his promise. Will you do the same? Actually, you can also encounter Sander Cohen later in the game at Olympus Heights in his apartment. Again, all you have to do is obey him, not disrupt the dancing splicers, and he'll let you go free. Instead of fighting him in Fort Frolic, it's actually better to fight him in Olympus, because there's a weapon upgrade station in his bedroom that's only accessible once you fight him there. And his piece is really good, just saying. So that concludes the character portion of the BioShock breakdown. Next time will be the themes and ideas the game presents to the player. See you then!